Welcome back to He's a Giant, a pod about all things Giants football and all things college football. Brought to you by Sal and Monty. Monty, how is it going, man?
What's going on, Sal? Lots going on in the Giants world ever since our last episode talking about the breakdown from Seattle. So just arguing with Giants fans. That's basically all that's been going on for me.
Better get used to it because it's going to be like that for like the next 3 months, maybe the next 6 months or so. Yeah, a lot of happening since the brutal loss in Seattle. Unfortunately, none of it really good. But I guess that's to be expected when you start 1-3 and you're kind of staring down the clear path of another rebuild, another tear down happening.
Yep.
Couple of issues that popped up before we get into today's episode. And before I start, I just want to thank all of our viewers. You guys have been awesome. Thanks for all your support. Make sure to like us on any platform you follow us, whether it's iTunes, Spotify, YouTube. Like, subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe, leave us 5-star reviews. Everybody says the same thing. We appreciate it. But thank you guys as always. Today, we're going to be going over, when we get to our player profiles, we're going over off-ball linebackers. So we're making our way through these position groups. I know people are chomping at the bit for us to get into quarterback, and I promise you we will get there. But we committed to doing quarterback at the very end because we felt like it was just the appropriate thing to do. That's before we knew what would happen this season. But to be honest, part of the reason we're going to stick with that is there are a lot of quarterbacks to go through. It is the biggest position group, believe it or not, in terms of depth and quality players. So we're going to get there eventually. But we are going to stick to off-ball linebackers today. Before we get there, let's talk about this Giant stuff, man. So 3 big issues I saw this week, at least. There are probably several, not just 3, but
but the main ones.
But the main one. So let's start right off the top with the big scandal, if you want to say, the Evan Neal issue. So obviously, for those who are listening out, I'm sure you guys already know Evan Neal, in a little soundbite yesterday, asked a question about the boos and the fans, and kind of sounded off and made an off the cusp remark about how a lion doesn't concern himself with sheep and how he's a lion, and then basically, I forget the exact wording, but basically said, "Why would I care about the opinions of people who flip burgers and hot dogs? You don't really flip hot dogs, Evan Neal, but I get it." So caught a lot of shit, understandably so. Walked it back with a sort of the standard company, PR department. What the hell have you done here? Signed this apology to the fans a few hours later. By then, unfortunately, the damage was done with segments of the fan base. So let's get some thoughts on this. What was your initial takeaway, and just give me where you are with this whole Evan Neal thing.
I mean, my initial takeaway was just that he's a dumbass. Like, I was not offended or mad. I was just like, you're an idiot. Like, you're like making a generalized statement about the fan base that it pretty much decides like if you're here or not. If they demand that you're not on this team, then like our ownership tends to listen to that stuff. So like, you probably should just not try to piss off the fan base. It's going to make your life harder. With that said, I urge the fan base not to go after this kid. He's a good kid who's literally said nothing but like the correct thing his entire time here. He's frustrated. He's bad, and he apologized. I'm way more worried about his awful play than I am about him talking about me flipping hamburgers and hot dogs. I don't really give a shit. What about you?
Yeah, same here. I think he's more worried about his awful play too. So, like you said, he's a good kid by all accounts. He's a hard worker, does and says all the right things going back to his days at Alabama, and even going back to his days at IMG Academy. He's frustrated, understandably so. I think his whole life he's dominated at every level. He comes to the NFL and he's just getting dog walked every single week, and he just looks terrible out there. And I'm sure we talk about it every single day, every single week. Certainly, he's probably thinking about it every single minute. He knows what's happening. I think he's frustrated. He's frustrated by his failures at the NFL level. Frustrated by the team's failures. That losing has a tendency to really exacerbate all of these anxieties. And he lashed out, and it was stupid. There's no excuse for what he said. you don't pick a fight with the fans. It's just a dumb move to
You're
make.
not gonna win it. Like,
You can't win it, and it was stupid. But that's what it was. It was a stupid moment from a young kid who's probably frustrated about his play, and that's that. I made a comment on, I went on a bit of a rant earlier today on Twitter, and I called out people who I thought in our fan base who have platforms who went out of their way to bash this kid. And I thought that was odd. I was like, like I get it, like you're pissed off. Um, but piling on this kid now, especially from segments of the fan base that were the ones banging the drum to run it back and saying how awesome the Giants were, and they're probably frustrated the Giants are not what they thought the team, the team would be. Taking it out on this kid, all you're going to do is anger and enrage the fan base and alienate this kid further.
yep.
The reality is he's an important cog of our future in one way or another, right? He either works out at right tackle, works out at guard, or is such a bust that we have to actually know the answer to that and figure out how to invest in fixing the line without him in the future. But he's an important person. My view on this is he's come to the league and been poorly coached. You and I've talked about it a lot. He's been badly coached, badly prepared. He's in a bad situation. That's the reality. The Giants have put him in a very bad situation. Not excusing his poor play at all. He's just been, he's got to do his own job better. But um, I don't think it helps anybody here to pile on the kid. I would urge Giant fans who listen to us, leave the kid alone. Just let it be. You can criticize his bad play all you want. You can say you're not playing well. I think that's all fair game. Always is.
Yeah, agreed.
But just leave it at that and let this play out.
Yeah, man. I think that there's some people who have platforms, and in my opinion, they have an obligation to, when there's important young players who, are kids and make mistakes, to try to urge the fans not to make the situation any worse, because that's how these things spiral out of control. And then urging them to pile on just makes the whole situation worse. If you want to see this kid succeed, and maybe he never will because he's seen a lot of struggles from a football standpoint, but if you have a hope, just alienating now and calling for him to be off the team isn't helping anything. I mean, if he keeps making mistakes, all for it, go after him, but don't turn on him after one mistake. Just fucking if just put your focus where it belongs, that he's playing bad football. That's where the focus belongs.
Leave it alone at that. I mean, I think that's always fair game, right? The fans will always be here. There's no reason to go after the kid. I just don't see anything in it. I kind of wish, I know he wouldn't do it, but I kind of wish Evan Neal had taken his frustrations out publicly on his coach. I know he wouldn't do that, but I felt like that was misplaced anger. It was anger at his situation. I really feel like if he was lashing out and he lashed out the wrong people, I hope the fans get that, and realize this is a frustrated kid and just not excusing what he did. Just hope for the best for him in terms of being a good Giant, a good, better player. And that's what I'll leave it at. I don't think you're going to hear another word out of this kid the rest of his career as a Giant. Unless something really good happens and he feels comfortable speaking up, but he's probably going to keep his mouth shut, keep his nose to the ground, and hopefully it works out.
I don't think he's going to want to talk to the media after that one.
Yeah, that was a rough one.
The media heard that quote and was like, "Oof, this is going to get me clicks."
And I'm sure Giants players don't listen to us or watch us. I kind of hope they do. But if you guys are listening, I have been a New York sports fan since I was growing up in the in the early '80s in New York City. I will tell you right now, when the New York media, I'm a couple of generations in now, when they sense blood in the water, they go for the kill. They sense a dysfunctional locker room right now. They sense a team spiraling. They're coming for you. They're looking for you to make a misstep, and they are going to absolutely make a mountain out of a molehill out of everything you guys say and do, and it's going to be put under a microscope, and they're going to want to blow it up because guess what? It's really good for their clicks. It's good for them. So just be wary of that, Giants players. Just keep your mouth shut, keep your nose to the ground, keep working.
And it's more true than it ever was. The game of clicks are just coming more and more rampant in how people report now. So,
or so you say.
Yeah,
the click world is a dangerous game. All right, so I think that sort of covers our Evan Neal thing. We're just hoping the kid can figure it out. And I'll take advantage of this moment to go on my weekly rant. Please, Giants, make the change. Get a new coach for Evan Neal and the rest of our offensive
Need to
line. I can't watch this
we
anymore.
we can't go into next season with the plan that Evan Neal is going to be the right tackle no matter what, and you gotta try to see if you can fix him before this year ends.
Do something. Get a consultant. Please do something.
Something.
Anyway, um, moving on to the next issue, and I think this is sort of the bigger issue, the more pertinent issue. Article today in the Athletic by Sando going over some NFL coaches and their views of Daniel Jones with some pretty vicious commentary. Rough stuff to read. None of it really, in my opinion, inaccurate. Pretty honest, but you just put it up on our screen there. But essentially, coaches pointing out, both offensive and defensive coaches, that the Giants are, for lack of a better way of saying it, a limited team because of Daniel Jones. That they
Mm.
give him a very basic quarterback plan, that they don't put much on his plate, and he still can't execute it properly. They go into some details, like him missing throws, meaning even when he completes throws, throwing behind receivers, being late on throws, reading leverage wrong. What they consider to be basic quarterback ability. These coaches think he just can't do it right, and they're not. I think one went so far as to say this is not opinion; it's all on tape. Um, and defensive coaches kind of elaborating on how everybody knows it, and the Giants are not going anywhere with him essentially at quarterback. This offense is not budging. So, kind of a hard hitting read. I
Yeah.
don't think there was anything untrue in it, honestly, for people who are being honestly critical of Daniel Jones. But what are your thoughts on this when you read it? What was your initial reaction to this? And same thing, like where do you land on this issue?
Yeah, man. Look, it seems like everybody around the league can see Daniel Jones' issues. I mean, you can say what you want about the article, but they did their best to try to continue to cite different coaches who commented on it and give examples from those coaches of what they're talking about. For anybody who's not watching this and is listening to it, I'll read off the main quote from this article, and if you didn't see it, and it goes, "It's very noticeable how little they make him play like an NFL quarterback," a defensive coach said. "He has the easiest reads and the easiest concepts, and still he does not throw the ball accurately. He doesn't throw to the correct leverage, doesn't throw the wide receiver open, just doesn't do it. I'm giving you zero opinions. This is all the tape shows." And he goes on to give multiple examples of that from tape. Look, man, I think this is clear. I think you heard that from last game with Devin Witherspoon after the game saying that they know that Daniel Jones liked to stare down his first read, and you saw him do it, and they picked it off and took it for a touchdown. The the book's out on Daniel Jones across the NFL right now. I don't know if he can do anything to fix it, but the way people view him is pretty cut and dry right now, and it's not a good NFL quarterback, and it's deserved in my opinion.
Yeah, I think the book's been out on Daniel Jones for a long time. To be totally honest, I don't think teams are playing him all that differently. I think in his best year last year, where he was the most efficient he'd ever been, the criticism of him from certain segments of the fan base, myself included, I was firmly in that segment, was that while he was very efficient and deserves credit for the way he played last year within the structure of that offense, that largely that offense was rookie ball. Um, it was a simplified system for a quarterback who has the athletic ability that Daniel Jones has with his legs, which was, you know, creative ways to get guys open in space in the short and intermediate area, cut the field in half, make him look only one way, often to the boundary side where it's a shorter field. First read was usually like a short area throw. I mean, and that's represented by his average depth of target, which is one of the lowest in the NFL last year. If it wasn't there, look for the B gap run. If that was there, take it. If it wasn't there, then he had to look around for other progressions, and that's often when he struggled. And to be fair, most quarterbacks do struggle once they have to come off their first read. That's not a Daniel Jones issue. But I think the issue here is that the Giants simplified the offense substantially for him to provide him a platform of success, and he did reasonably well in it. But even last year, you saw, as teams caught on to the use of his legs in the offense, several teams just putting a spy on him, taking away his legs, forcing him into more passing centric situations, and he struggled. The more impressive the defensive opponent was, the more he struggled. And it wasn't by like a little bit, it was just like dramatic drop off where he just couldn't function, like the games against Dallas and the game certainly against Philadelphia. Seattle did this to him last year. And we're seeing it this year. We played good defenses, and they've all just dominated him completely. He looks lost out there. So I don't hear any lies in this article. It's rough to hear when it's your quarterback of your team, but I think this is not changing. It's year 5. Him, shout out to our friend Authentic. He said many times like he's not going to morph and mutate into a different person and a different quarterback simply because he got paid money. Um, he's still the same fundamental quarterback, and that's okay. The issue here is I don't think that you pay a guy $40 million to expect him to be the same limited quarterback. The Giants clearly thought there was some reasonable expectation that he was going to leap up and advance his game, and it just hasn't happened. So
Nope.
that's probably the biggest reason why we're 1-3 and looking like the worst team in the NFL, to be honest.
Yep, definitely. I mean, you can't deny that. When you look at the last game where there was a fumble that put the Seattle on the 5-yard line and a pick six that directly resulted in 14 points for Seattle, and one of those likely would have been a touchdown if we didn't throw a pick six, and we would have been without those two. We're probably up, 10-3 going
Yeah,
or 10-7 going into
rough stuff, man.
yeah. Yep.
He's gonna have to elevate his game to have a fighting shot at anything. But at this point, I'll be honest, like I'm not expecting anything. I think that the book is out. I don't know if he has in his bag of tricks abilities to overcome these deficiencies of his own with teams bearing down on him. I just don't know, and I do have concerns about the state of our locker room right now. We'll find out, but we've got a rough schedule coming up, and we're not even really going to get into the Miami game. Um, I'll watch it. That's what I'll say. I'll
Yeah.
watch it, but I'm just kind of at this point. I'm just kind of praying it's not an absolute massacre, but I'm kind of expecting an absolute massacre.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm watching,
so
hoping it's not a massacre, and hoping see some growth out of some people that we see as long-term pieces, most notably, guys like Kayvon Thibodeau or Evan Neal, but, we'll
yep,
see.
yeah. Which brings us to our third, and I guess our final Giants-related topic before we go into the off-ball linebackers. Dan, there have been some rumblings, and then Dan Graziano, for what it's worth, tweeted out today. I don't know if it's true. I don't know what his cited sources are. He's blocked me for some reason, so I don't even remember what I said to him. But I was like, I'm blocked by Graziano. Um, but he tweeted out that the Giants may look to part ways with Wink Martindale if the season continues to go the way it's going at the end of the season. Um, we talked about this, that there's a possibility that the Giants may choose to scapegoat somebody at the end of this, and Wink being an outsider, so to speak, compared to the Joe Shane Brian Dable connection, um, is an obvious candidate that they may look at. My personal view on this, I know, is like yours. I think it's really short-sighted and unfair to single out Wink, assuming this is true, right? We're just going to go under the assumption that there's some truth to this report and it's not just made up. But if it is true, um, I don't like it. I can see the merits of an argument that you can make that maybe Wink Martindale's defense is not what you want. You may want to transition to a different style of defense in the NFL at some
Mhm.
point. Certainly, Baltimore got to that conclusion at some point.
Yeah.
But what bothers me here is it really seems like he's being made a scapegoat, and I have to ask myself why. Why is Wink Martindale the scapegoat for the failures of our offense? Because let's be real, all of our resources, Joe Shane put the bulk of his resources, both in terms of high draft capital the last few years and mainly dollars allocated with the cap money he's had squarely in the offense. I mean, the money has gone to the offense, the investments, the veteran investments, it's gone to the offense. And the defense, for lack, it just got less. Bottom line, yes, they got Kayvon, and they did get the first 2 picks. They got the first number 1 pick both these years, so there is that. You got Kayvon Thibodeau, and then you got Deontae Banks. But after
Okereke.
that, huh?
Okereke was another thing, but
Right, but that was really the only notable addition on defense from a spending standpoint. I mean, guys like
mm,
Ashawn Robinson and Nacho are kind of throwaways. Like they're guys who, I mean, I don't consider them to be really meaningful impact guys. They're just kind of
I mean,
extra
they run
guys.
for depth because we
Right,
have
they're
extra
depth guys.
guys.
Correct. Brian Okereke, Bobby Okereke was the one real addition, and Deontay Banks a rookie, and the other starting corner is a 6th round player that they got
Got
lucky on.
benched.
Right, who got benched. So they have not given Wink the kind of resources that they've given the offensive side of the ball, Brian Dable's side of the ball. So what gives here? I mean, how is he the scapegoat for the failures of Daniel Jones, our offensive line, and our offense to be able to do anything?
Yeah, I mean, especially when you look this season, the defense has not been the problem comparatively. Everybody's been a problem. Don't get me wrong. The
Sure.
entire team, it's been a collective effort. But on the list of issues, the defense is pretty low down there. And Wink Martindale's scheme for this defense is even lower down there. The main issue
Right.
with this defense is tackling, which is so much deeper than Wink Martindale. That goes to effort and that goes to like maybe even these light camps that we had all summer. But
Right.
like Wink Martindale is not teaching these people to tackle. You're supposed to know how to
Right.
tackle in this, but you could even say it goes down to like the job like Joe Shane is doing, bringing in players who are good tacklers and not like there's so many people you could blame for the tackling and like I, Wink sure shares it, but like realistically, if you're thinking of reasons why he shares it, there's really not a lot of good reasons to give him blame for the tackling outside of that he's the coach of the defense.
The tackling stuff that people blame Wink for, like, what do you think he's doing? You think he's unteaching them how these guys should tackle? Like these fuckers who've been playing football since they're like 6 years old. Wink's like, this is you've been tackling wrong your whole life. Do it this way, and now they forgot how to tackle. No, they're out there. Let's be honest. Some of these guys are out there making business decisions, and
Yeah,
and some of them are just
100%. Adore.
yeah, yeah. And some of these guys they're using bad technique. I mean, you think Wink Martindale taught them that? No, he's putting them in position to make the tackles. He's getting them into 3rd and longs with his scheme. Now, I think it's fair to argue that on a 20,000-foot view, maybe the Wink Martindale defense is not one you want to commit to long term. I can definitely see that argument. It's definitely one I've thought about, right? That is this the defense you want, especially as your team advances, right? As you get better and better and you face higher levels of competition, you face higher levels of quarterbacks who generally chew up the blitz, right?
Yeah.
Um, is this a defense you want to be committed to, or would you rather have, as you develop your roster, a team that drifts more into some form of zone, whether it's Tampa 2, whether it's cover 2, whatever it may be, something that's more of the modern, remove the explosive play element from the offense kind of game, try to bait quarterbacks into interceptions. Um, I think that's a fair discussion to have. Like, is Wink Martindale the right man long term for the defense? I think that's very different than saying he deserves to lose his job over the nonsense going on this year. I think that's egregious. So if there's any truth to that, I'd be very disappointed in Joe Shane and Brian Dable. Very disappointed if that's the conclusion they're reaching by watching what's going on right now.
I also don't like the idea where I know we haven't quite given the assets we've done to the offense, but when you're drafting a guy like Deontae Banks, who was the handpicked by Wink Martindale, that was his number one choice in this draft, and
Yeah.
is a perfect fit for his defense. Is like the ideal press man corner. If you just go, that's fine. We're moving on. Like you traded up to get him, like
Yeah.
because he was a good fit. I'm not saying that Deontae Banks couldn't fit other schemes. He could, but like the reason you traded up for him is because of how good of a fit you felt he was for Wink Martindale and how
There were better
like
there were better players on the board. Let's be honest. At where we picked, there were better players than Deontay Banks on the board, plain and simple. Um, so for example, Nolan Smith was on the board. He's a higher graded player than Deontay Banks. and he was there. Brian Brzee was there. I'm forgetting there was an offensive tackle, maybe Anton Harrison. There were guys up
We
there
didn't
who you
have
could
need,
argue.
but Dalton Kincaid.
Dalton Kincaid, right? There were better players in the world. So if you're just saying, well, we're not drafting for need here, we're just going by best player. I don't think you can make a sound argument that Deonte Banks was clearly the best player. You could make an argument that he might have been, and certainly for the needs of this team, he probably was. But to trade up one pick to get him, no, that was a targeted player for Wink Martindale specifically for his scheme. So it's irrational to me to say now, oh, well, forget it, especially when that player is playing well, right? That player is playing well. So
Trey Hawkins was also a guy they brought in for his scheme, and
right.
is playing well, especially for his draft capital. Like I know he got benched, but especially for his draft capital, he's playing very well. Like
Right. Like I said, I have
Gordon Riley. Like
yeah, I have issues with Wink, man. I'm not gonna lie. Like I like Wink a lot. I really do. I have issues with him. Like for example, in the past game, we saw Kayvon Thibodeau finally being allowed to rush the passer with Aziz on the other side, and he looked great. Yeah, there were backup tackles, but still, he looked quick. He had a pass rush plan. He was using his hands. Got 2 sacks. Right, that's impactful. And then he drops him into coverage in the second half. You know, it wasn't that big a deal, but like that stuff gets a little annoying at times. I would say that's a minor annoyance if the team is doing its job on defense, which it did. Nobody in their right mind watched that game against Seattle and thought that like there were people who complain about the defense. They're not in their right mind. The defense did a great job that night. They really did a great job. Wink Martindale has these guys ready to play football. That's a lot more than I can say about our offensive side of the ball that Brian Dable did getting our guys ready.
yeah,
You know, and so
to me, like I get what you're saying. You're echoing what a lot of Giants fans feel the same way with Kayvon. To me, the only reason it bothers me is because we have been struggling to get a pass rush. We did a lot of this
right,
stuff last year, and people really weren't pointing it out because we were
getting a pass rush.
manufacturing pass rush. Like
Right.
the Dallas Cowboys, like I'm totally different. Micah Parsons, probably the best pass rush in the NFL. Do you know how often they drop him back into coverage?
Like 20% of the time, something like that.
Yeah, like a lot. Like he's
Yeah,
still and
like
he's still
15 to 20%.
impactful. Like I know it's
Yeah.
for a different reason for Wink. It's more because they don't want you to know where the pass rush is coming from. But like you can, as long as the pass rush is getting there, I don't give a shit about what like Kayvon's stats look like. But when it's not working and you're dropping your best pass rusher in the coverage, I understand where it's like, what the fuck are we doing here, dude? Like,
Yeah. Again, I think there is an intelligent argument to be made that you may want a different defensive style than what Wink Martindale offers in the modern NFL as the team evolves. I don't think this is it. And that's what bothers me about this. Is just it just feels very reactionary. Again, that's assuming this report is true. I don't know if it's true or if he's just bullshitting, but I'm going to assume if somebody put it out there, there has to be he's hearing something. So that just sucks to hear. If they let's just say for a second, hypothetically, they did remove Wink Martindale. Something else that you and I've talked about, you know, is like where do they go? And to me, it feels, and I'm not saying I would do this, but it feels pretty obvious like they would turn to Leslie Frazier.
yeah,
Uh,
it almost feels like they would use Wink as a scapegoat so they could hire Leslie Frazier.
yeah, and he's a good defensive coordinator. This is
Very
not
good.
a knock on Leslie Frazier. It's just what are we doing? You know, are we just gonna run it back with the old Buffalo team?
Yeah.
You know, and bring him. I don't know if that's what happens. Now, Frazier comes from the Tony Dungy tree, the
Mhm.
Tampa 2 defense, and I'm actually a big fan of that style of defense. I think it actually really works well when you have the right personnel. I actually think we have personnel that could be good in Tampa 2. I really do. I think we have the right kinds of DBs and pass rushers that can make this work. And I kind of like the system, but again, we'll see what happens. I just don't like when teams scapegoat a good coordinator and blame him for the failures of the other side of the ball. Basically, that's very
Yeah.
unfortunate to me.
Or
Um,
players' efficiency or whatever it may
right.
be. But
Well,
yeah, I
well,
agree.
let's take it a step further, man. Like if they keep losing, they're gonna trade players in all likelihood. Somebody's gonna get traded, right? And the best players to trade are gonna be on the defensive side of the ball.
Yep.
I mean, so you're talking about guys like Adoree Jackson, Leonard Williams, maybe Xavier McKinney. You're gonna gut him of his best players. The
Yep.
defense is gonna it's gonna
And
if they do that, which is good for the team. Like, I'm all for it. Trade the guys, get draft capital. But if you do that, the defense is going to be more shitty. Are you going to
Yeah,
blame him
the
for that
bad
too?
luck. Exactly,
Right.
the bad luck to blame him for that after you got him of his best players.
Yeah. So anyway, a lot going on. Sadly, this is the kind of stuff that happens when you're a losing team, and not just a losing team, but a spiraling downward, like a burning carcass of shit losing team. That's unfortunately what they are,
Yeah.
until proven otherwise. But do you have any other stuff to talk about the Giants?
Nope, I think we can go ahead and now jump into some of our scouting that we have for this week.
Awesome. All right. So as promised, this is week one, two, three, four, five. What is this? Week 6 of our
Yeah, so we're
reviews.
over halfway through.
It's just past halftime. So
Yep.
going into off-ball linebackers, definitely an area that might be of need for the Giants. Uh, man, this this group, man, Monty, we've had a lot of fun reviewing the other position groups just because of all the talent. I got to tell you, man, this one was
Yeah.
rough.
Yeah.
This one was rough.
Which is to show you guys, like, we're not just like talking up all these position groups saying, no, this is great, everything's great. No, like, linebackers is not great. The other ones were. They really
They
were.
were legitimately good. We were excited reviewing the other players, all of them, right? I mean, 30 whatever some odd players, 40, maybe 40 players, whatever we did. But man, this is just tough. This was hard to get through. It was just not enjoyable. So we're gonna try to get through this for you guys, and we hope you enjoy it. This is more so you know who the guys that are out there. There are some exciting players in this. There's there's a lot more of to be determined here, and this is the top of the class. So
Yeah.
why don't we get
And
into it?
I
Yeah.
one thing I want to say before we jump into it too, and you'll see as we go along here. There's a certain type of linebacker Sal and I think the Giants should be targeting. We think that there's more of a need of a Mike than kind of a smaller guy. It's not a lot of size in this class, so that also added to this. But yeah, let's go ahead and jump into this, and I'll pull up the video for our first guy.
All right. So our linebacker one in this class, sort of the consensus linebacker one, Barrett Carter from Clemson. If you watched any Clemson football, you, you got a little sound going on there.
Yeah, I realize that. There we go. All right.
There we go. So Barrett Carter from Clemson, 6'1", 225 pounds. He is a true junior, third-year player. He was a 5-star recruit I believe, out of Gwinnett High School in Georgia. He crazy athlete. He played first. He wanted to come out as a wide receiver, if I recall. Then they moved him to running back. I think there's some stat like he ran for like almost 200 yards in a game, like 17 carries or something in high school. But basically, it was a linebacker recruit coming out of high school to college. One of the top recruits in the country when he came out. Again, a third-year player. His 2022 grades were all solid, all well into the 70s or 80s. 78.8 run defense grade by PFF, 82.4 pass rush grade. He generated 24 pressures, which is a ton. Here are his sack numbers total. I have him as, and they're different numbers for his sacks depending on which source you're looking at. What I have here is 77. I got 77 tackles, 10 and a half tackles for a loss, 5.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 2 interceptions, and a 12.8% missed tackle rate, which is, it's going to sound, you're going to hear that number today. That's not a lot. That's sort of down the middle, a little bit better than down the middle in terms of missed tackles. But why don't you go ahead and give us a little bit more information and your thoughts on Barrett Carter, Monty?
Yeah, man. I mean, he's a really good player. I mean, you mentioned the size, 6'1", 225. So he is on the smaller end. I mean, at 6'1", 225, that makes him, a little bit thicker. He's, despite that weight, but he's an athletic freak. That's the thing you'll love about him. He's very, very twitchy, and he's explosive as hell. I'd say his number one trait is rushing the passer. I mean, if anybody watching, you just saw him absolutely annihilate the quarterback there on the screen at Boston College. But it will run players down. He seems to have the ability to cover too. I don't necessarily know how strong he is in zone coverage, but when he turns his hips and runs with a player and man, he he can hold up with just about anybody. He has that type of speed. He's just a ridiculous athlete. Um, and I'd say he is like a true linebacker. Like you've seen some guys in the past here, even notably at Clemson, between guys like Simmons, and you know,
Simpson. Yeah,
Simpson and then
yeah,
Simmons on our own team. Yeah.
yeah.
So those guys really weren't true linebackers. They were more of a hybrid type players. Um in Carter's case, he is like a true linebacker, but he had 5 forced incompletions last year, so he definitely was successful in coverage. He blitzes well, and he's solid in run game. He's a good all-around player, I'd say. There's no deficiencies from those 3 levels of his games. All 3 of them he does very well. But what else do you have on him, Sal?
Yeah, I mean, same thing. I mean, he jumps off the screen. You watch Clemson games, and he's flying all over the place. Like you see the explosiveness. He's fast as hell. He has incredible short area burst. When I watched him, the thing that stood out to me most, what you mentioned, is like, man, he is great at rushing the passer. Like whether it's lining up as an actual just true pass rusher or blitzing off the A gap or blitzing from the edge. He's just so aggressive in rushing the passer. Gets a ton of quarterback hits. You're showing the play right now where he hurdles a running back in the game
Mhm.
against Louisville and gets a sack. Like he's just fast. His closing speed is incredible. I mean, he does crazy things from the linebacker position as an athlete. Um, just impressive stuff. I was telling you earlier, like I don't like to make this comparison with anybody, but he sort of reminds you of like a smaller version of like what Micah Parsons looked like coming out of
Yeah.
Penn State.
Yeah, you said that one.
Yeah, like an off-ball linebacker who kind of plays a little bit like a tweener with an edge, right? As a pass rusher. So now Micah Parsons was, I think, 6'2", 240 something, or nearly 250 when he came out. You mentioned Carter 6'1", 225. That's not an edge's size. So he's not going to be an edge in the NFL. He'd have to put on 30 pounds to be a realistic edge, at least 25 pounds. So I don't see that in his arsenal in the future. I think that's unlikely. I think
Mm,
he's truly an off-ball linebacker, but he's gonna have to put on weight anyway to play
yeah.
in the NFL. I think he's all traits, he's all athleticism, and he's got everything NFL teams look for. He really does. Like, and I think coaches salivate looking at an athlete like this, and he's gonna blow up the combine. I think he's gonna be the top linebacker off the board. Um, there's still some parts of his game I think that need help. Like you said, like I don't think while he's a linebacker, I don't think he's as instinctive as you'd like a Mike linebacker to be. I'm not sure that he's really a Mike in the NFL. I think he's
Yeah.
more of sort of like a weak side linebacker or even a Sam in certain situations. Um, but as a weapon on defense, I think he's lethal. Um, and that's kind of how I would view him. I don't think he's like a true plug and play Mike linebacker, but I think just as a pure defensive weapon, like to be used in coverage and pass rush, everything, just he's a weapon. I think teams would love to get their hands on him.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I'll
that's
say, like, I don't necessarily think the Giants have a need for him just based off of who we have on this roster between Bobby Okereke, who I think is better off as a will linebacker, and then I personally think we should bring back Isaiah Simmons because I think he's a good fit for this defense, and I don't think he's overly expensive. Instead of spending a first round pick on a guy like this, or even an early second, but I will say I do think he is going to be a guy that like Wink Martindale would love. I think he would fit into that like a Devin White type player. You could, for the Baltimore comparison, you could say like a Patrick Queen, but he's definitely a better player than Patrick Queen was. He's going to be able to be a blitzer and get after the passer. Uh, so yeah, I definitely think that there's teams that are gonna love to have him. He's going to be a creative piece. He fits that positionless defense type mentality. But yeah, I
yeah.
just don't necessarily see it with us based
Well,
off of
well,
him.
and to me, this is what Isaiah Simmons really should be.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, I think he should be used in this way. And I don't know what the hell they were doing over in Arizona and why it didn't work out. Obviously, I didn't watch all the Arizona games, but um, I'd like to see him get more playing time with the Giants and see if we can use him like this. Because if we, like you said, I've always thought Bobby Okereke is more of a weak side linebacker and just an outstanding athlete in space. Um, and I think while he can play Mike, that's not where his strengths are best suited. but I feel like Isaiah Simmons is sort of similar, right? He's a guy who can be used out on the outside as an athlete. He can play man coverage on running backs, maybe carry some tight ends, be used as a blitzer, just a weapon all over the field. And I think if you have guys like Okereke and Simmons already on your team, a guy like Carter, well, there's never enough great players on your team. That's not necessarily the main need of your team. I think you see even now we struggle against the run. If you're going to go for a linebacker, I want somebody who's more of like a traditional Mike linebacker who's just gonna be your thumper, and I think that's what I'm looking for. But Barrett Carter, I think, is easily going to be the first linebacker taken off the board, barring something crazy happening this year.
He's gonna blow up the combine.
He is. All right. Any other thoughts on Carter, or should we move on to number two?
Yeah, we can go ahead and just move on. I think we said enough about him.
All right.
All
Why
right,
don't you go?
so
Why don't you take us into our next guy?
yep. So let me just go ahead and pull up his tape right here and make sure I have it muted. All right. So our next guy, as you can see on the screen here, is actually Barrett Carter's teammate, Jeremiah Trotter Jr. Out of Clemson. He's 6 foot, 230 pounds, and if that name sounds familiar, his dad is actually a former NFL player, Jeremiah Trotter. He's in the Eagles Hall of Fame, and he's a former All Pro. So his stats last year, he had 89 tackles, 50 of them solo, 13 and a half tackles for loss, 2 interceptions, 1 forced fumble, and a touchdown that he took one of those interceptions back for. And then for his PFF grades, he had an 86.9 overall PFF grade, 77.1 in run defense, 87.6 in pass rush, and an 89.7 in coverage. To add on to that, he had 23 total pressures, 12.6% missed tackle rate, which honestly surprised me because that man tackles so well. And then
it was 6 tackles total.
Yeah.
It wasn't a ton.
Yeah, and then 3 PBUs. So, yeah, he's a guy that I know me and you talked about. I think we both are huge fans of Trotter, and he's probably our favorite linebacker in the draft. But I'll let you, talk about why you like him so much.
Yeah, I love Trotter, man. To me, like we put Carter number one because I think you have to respect the consensus view on this because of the athlete that he is.
Yep.
Trotter, in my opinion, is if gun to my head, I know it's going to sound crazy, but if I'm picking at whatever spot for the Giants and I'm told you got to pick a linebacker here for the Giants, just pick one. I would take Trotter.
I agree.
And the reason is all the things you just mentioned. I mean, we see this over and over again with the NFL bloodlines. Like these guys know how to play football.
Yep.
He just knows how to play football. You watch him. He plays like a vet. We mentioned that when we are discussing him. He plays like a guy who's been in the league already. His dad is obviously was a great player on the Eagles. He's a throwback, man. He's a throwback linebacker. He's yoked up. He's not very tall. He's only 6 feet tall relative to these other guys, but he's listed at 230 pounds. He looks big, right? Whereas his teammate, Barrett Carter, looks kind of on the small side at 225. This guy looks big at 230. He looks like a big stout 230, and he plays like it. And for that size, he's not really what I would call slow. Although sometimes on tape he looks slower than you think he would look. But like we discussed, part of that is just that he's so instinctive. Like he knows where to be on every play. He's so calm out there. He's such a good diagnoser of places. IQ is through the roof that he's never out there playing with any kind of panic or urgency. He just has everything under control. Like that, when you watch him, he looks like a guy that just has everything under control in every play. He knows where the ball is going. He knows what his assignment is. He knows how to get there. And he just doesn't look like he has to rush. And I think people will hold that against him when they look at the tape. And we'll see what the athletic testing shows at the combine. Maybe he isn't that fast. I don't know. But he gets everywhere. Like a play is made, he's there. He makes tackles. That's the main job of a linebacker, right? You want somebody who can make tackles, somebody who can wrap around a ball carrier, bring him down. He does that. He does that with perfect technique, takes guys down. He gets there. He positions himself well. He reads his gaps very well. Even in coverage, like even though we're saying like he may not look super fast, he's somehow always in the right spot, especially in zone, right? I mean, you want your linebackers to be good in zone coverage. It's nice to have guys who can cover in man and carry a tight end down the seam. But like you and I discussed earlier today when we were talking about it, like, is that really something you want? Or would you rather have the linebacker who knows how to cover his zone and can read the quarterback's eyes like a safety and make plays on the ball, which he does. Like, you watch him, he can play like a DB. He just doesn't carry guys in man because I don't think that's his assignment. All in all, I think this guy is just a fantastic linebacker. And wherever he goes, he's the kind of guy that I could see being like a Luke Kuechly type. Seriously, like, just
Yeah.
come in, big tackler, just leader of the defense, making plays. One last, I forgot to mention, when he hits, it's something about the way he hits people. Like, I don't know if he just accelerates at the punch or something, but I've seen that, like, the ball, he knocks the ball loose. Like, he forces turnovers with his tackles. Like, he really does. And they don't all become turnovers, but he jars that ball loose a lot. It's almost like he knows how to strike to make sure that ball gets loose. And I think that sort of goes back to the whole NFL bloodline thing. He knows what he's doing out there.
Yeah.
So I mean, this is a guy, like, I think he's the total package as a linebacker, in my opinion. I know he may not have the speed on tape that these guys in the NFL today covet, but he does what linebackers are supposed to do, and he does it in a fantastic way. And so he's actually my true linebacker one, if you want to put it that way. But I went on and on. Do you have any other thoughts on Trotter here?
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed a lot of what we talked about earlier today, and I'm totally with you. I mean, I texted you, I'm like, I have my linebacker when I was looking at
Yeah,
tape, and it was Jeremiah Trotter, and it quite frankly isn't close. He's the full package, what I look for in a linebacker. And you mentioned that, like, the only thing is the speed, and to be honest with you, it would not surprise me if he came out and tested well and just shocked people, because I don't feel like he's ever running at full speed except for, like, when he's chasing down a guy, which granted he doesn't look the fastest always, but he is always just reading the offense and trying to, like, be ready to make his next move. You can see him just anticipating what the offense might do. And you mentioned he does that in pass coverage, and as everything we talked about, I totally agree with you. Is a guy like Barrett Carter, yes, he can run up and down the field with, whoever you put him on. But ideally, you don't want a linebacker in man coverage with anybody. I don't care how good of an athlete he is. I mean, look at Isaiah Simmons. Look how good of an athlete he is. Look how long he is, and look how well he hangs with people in coverage, even in the NFL. You don't want him in man coverage. That's not what you
yeah,
want to do with him. He can do it. Why he hasn't been a freak in coverage is because he's not a great zone guy. He can't sit there and read the quarterback eyes and make a jump on the ball. But that's what he does. That's what Jeremiah Trotter does. He absolutely can jump a ball and just be ready. That's why his PFF grade is so high. Is because of how smart of a player he is. When you watch him play, you said he just, that NFL bloodline just pops. You can see it. He looks different than any of these other linebackers we were watching. Everything he does, he looks like an NFL player, and he looks like a good NFL player. His technique is so good, and that might be kind of what you're going into with how he, knocks the ball loose and hits hard. It might not even be how hard he's coming in, but he's always places his hit on the right spot and just is exactly where he needs to be. He's such a good, fundamentally sound tackler. I mean, there he goes right there on tape, just knocking the ball away. And another thing he does, that I think would be great for the Giants is he sniffs out screens. That's something
yeah.
that comes with how smart of a player. And there's another one knocked out.
Yeah, see
Jesus.
see, these are the plays I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
He just hits the guy and the ball goes flying out, and he does it at full speed. I mean, look at this play. In open field, boom, like the ball
And,
just comes out, and it's
and
just there's something about the way he tackles. I can't even put my finger on is it his hand
he
technique or where
puts
he
his
drives his
shoulder
shoulder?
right on the ball there.
Right. I mean, it's incredible, and he does it at full speed. Like,
Yeah.
it's amazing how instinctive this guy is.
But
Boom.
yeah, anyway, the only thing is, yeah, he can sniff out screens. So, that's something the Giants have historically struggled with. we can talk about how we've struggled covering tight ends, and he's not going to really help with that outside of just them bringing them across behind the defense. But he will sniff out screens, and he will not miss a tackle, and he will be there to help. Oh, the one other thing I had about him is he is a gang tackler. Carl Banks said, hunt like wolves. He is
Yeah.
definitely that. He is, even if he's not a part of the play, he will be right there to help out tackling. There's two guys in this class, so I have that note for. But
Yep.
that's all about I have for him. But
No.
I love Jeremiah Trotter. It's everything that I look for in like a football player, honestly.
All right. And just going by the big board stuff, just to remind people. So personally, I think Barrett Carter will find himself either in the first round or maybe at the early part of the second round. Um, I don't think there's any guaranteed slam dunk first rounders in this class. I think Trotter will find himself somewhere in the middle of the second round, probably in the
Yeah.
50s or so. I think that's the range you'll find him in. So,
For
um,
Brugler, for example, Barrett Carter was 21 on his big board, and he only
mhm,
goes up to 50, and Trotter didn't make his top 50. So
right. Yeah, and I know Brugler's not as high on Trotter, but and Brugler, like we talked about, he's in tune with what NFL scouts are looking at. I know it's all about traits at that
yep.
level. And like I said, Trotter maybe doesn't ooze the traits, but man, like this is the kind of guy like you know how we always say GMs they just fuck up the draft all the time. I feel like people are going to pass on this guy and really regret it. They're
I
they're going
agree.
to regret passing this guy.
He's a
Yeah,
very good football player. I would be fine trading down in the second and taking him. If he fell to the third, I'd jump on him.
absolutely. All right. What? Why don't we move on to number three here? So
Yep.
number three on our list, similar kind of profile of a player, not quite at that level in my opinion, but it's a player going to another school now, going to Ohio State. Tommy Eichenberg, 6'2", 238 pounds. He's a four-star recruit. If the name sounds familiar, his brother was Liam Eichenberg. Is Liam Eichenberg, who the Giants are going to be seeing this weekend in Miami, the offensive lineman. Um, he is in his fifth year. This is a guy who is he's got some mileage on him. He's been in college a long time,
Yeah.
but his numbers are impressive: 120 tackles, 77 solos, 12 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks, one interception, one touchdown. His PFF grades are crazy: 86.8 PFF grade overall, 89.3 run defense grade, 73 pass rush grade, 77 coverage grade. He had 15 total pressures in 2022. In 2022, he had only a 10% missed tackle number, which is really solid. 13 missed tackles because he made so many tackles. He was in on everything, and three pass breakups. Um, Kind of a similar prototype as Trotter, but I'll let you go into him a little bit more. What are your thoughts when you saw Eichenberg play?
Yeah, I mean, it just shows how long he's been in college football. He knows how to play the game. He's very instinctual. He's very smart, and he's the clear leader of that Ohio State defense. They look to him. He's calling out protections or calling out the protections by the offense and different schemes, from the linebacker position. He's like their green dot player. He's I think he's a high floor type of linebacker. I think he's going to come in. He will be an NFL starter. Um, he's competitive. He's tough. Uh, he can stack and shed. He plays with good leverage. He has active hands, whether in the run game or pass rushing. And also see he will time the snap really well. He definitely is a really smart player, and that pops on the tape. Um,
He's
and
he's polished.
yeah, very polished. I think he might be at. I don't know how much left there is for him to get better. I think he is very much who he is at this point. Obviously, the NFL, he's not going to come in fully who like as a day one player, the best he'll ever be. I think he'll obviously grow once he gets here, but I don't think there's the same amount to grow as there's some of these other players in the draft. I think that kind of just comes with the territory with him being a fifth year player. but he's a very good player. I think, you know, I mentioned it with Trotter, but I think it shows even more for Tommy Eichenberg, where, you know, he fits that Carl Banks hunt like wolves even more. Like, I mean, you can see that with the 120 tackles. He's in on everything. If you watch Ohio State's defense, he is always involved. Um, I wasn't like overly impressed by him. I think he's like a decent athlete, and he didn't like pop like the first two did for me. That's like kind of the best way I can put it. But I would be fine with taking Eichenberg. I think he could be an NFL starter. I just don't know if he'll ever be a difference maker in the NFL. What do you have on him?
Not a whole lot more. I mean, you know, good hands, active hands, good for the most part, a good tackler. Like you said, he's kind of always there. He tends to find his way to the ball um, because he's instinctive and he's polished and he knows where where plays are going. And I think that sort of speaks to some of the value of staying in college as long as you did. I mean, we're gone are the days, right, of the past where this year we're seeing it again. It's like a throwback to 20 years ago where guys stayed in college for 4 or 5 years and got as polished as possible before they got to the NFL. Now we want guys out earlier as athletes to mold, but Eichenberg, harkens back to the days where these guys came out and were ready to play. Um, you're right. I don't think there's a whole lot more projection. The way I would summarize him is he's kind of like a poor man's Trotter. Similar play style. I don't think he has the upside of Trotter. I don't think, obviously, between just his years and his age, there's just there's less left there to develop. But he's a solid player. Is he a starter at the NFL level? I think so. I think he's an average middle linebacker in the NFL who can do a solid job. Is he a star? Is he a Pro Bowler? I don't see that, but I think he's a reliable, solid middle linebacker as part of a solid linebacker unit. I think if he's asked to be the guy, I struggle to see it working out great. If he's asked to be one of the guys in a strong unit, I think he'd be an excellent addition there. And he can be a really impactful starter playing a mic role where he's not asked to do all the athletic things that everybody else around him is doing. That would be, to me, his perfect situation.
It's hard for me to see him as the weak link in the defense. It's just
Right.
also hard for me to see him being the guy that helps the defense
Yeah.
become like a top defense.
Yeah. He's a workhorse.
Yep.
And I think that you need guys like that. And they have value. What's that value? End of day two, maybe early day three. He's sort of like a
Yeah.
tweener, day two, day three kind of guy.
Yeah.
Uh,
I'm
I,
probably like round 4. I'd be happy with him.
right. I think if you got this guy in like the hundreds, you'd be pretty thrilled with the value because you're
Yep.
you're getting a starter. Um, you're getting a decent starter at that point. And I think that's what you're looking for if you can get it. But is he Trotter where you think he can come in and basically be the man on your defense? I don't think so.
Yeah. I agree.
And so there, I mean, there you see it, right? We just went from like the scrap, like literally from number 2 to number 3. Like number 2, we're talking about a guy who we see enormous upside in, and we love. And we go to number 3, and we're like, he might be a starter. Like
And it's so
that's the
funny
stats.
because my notes read so similarly for both of them, but they're just
Yeah,
not the same.
right.
They look different on tape no matter how many, pros they share.
Yeah. So, and just so you guys know, just to try to keep this as honest as possible, Monty and I do our own. We review our own film. We pick our guys. So what we do is we pick our group. We wait toward like the middle of the week before we get ready to start doing our breakdowns, and we send each other our top 5. And it's usually the same or similar, but we do it independently. We kind of do our own notes and our own film review. We don't really share them until right before the show. Um, but basically it's uncanny. We tend to have the same notes on these guys, and I think that's just I think we're looking for the same things in players, and we end up noticing the same things. And I think we both like Eichenberg, but definitely not at the level that we like the other guys. And that's the bottom line with me. He's a good player. I wouldn't go crazy if we got him. I wouldn't go crazy if we didn't. Um, but I think if the Giants got him day 3, I'd be happy.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, I'm surprised how similar we ended up with both Trotter and Eichenberg because they're so like I said, they're so similar in so ways, but I loved Trotter's tape, and it's funny that we both felt that way about him. But,
Yep.
all right, so I will go ahead and pull up the
Number
next
4.
guys. Yep, next guy's tape number 4 here. And we have Junior Colson. And Junior Colson is out of Michigan. So play the rival of Eichenberg there. He's 6'2", 235. And he is in his third year. He's a true junior, and he came to the US from Haiti at 9 years old. So he started learning the game of football later on in his life. He had 101 tackles, 42 solo tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, 79.9 run defense grade, an 86 tackling grade. And he had a 6.7 missed tackle rate. So very low. I think that's the lowest we've said so far. In addition to that, he had 2 pass breakups. So, impressive player. Obviously a little bit smaller, but not that small. 6'2", 35, not that bad at all. But he has solid numbers, and clearly with that tackling PFF grade and his missed tackle rate, he's a very solid, clean tackler. But what do you have on him, Sal?
It's interesting. I feel like his missed tackle numbers mask some bad technique. And I'll get into that. But basically, Junior Colson's a freak athlete. He's another so our last 2 guys, starting with Colson, are similar to Barrett in the sense that these guys are real high upside guys. They're going to test off the charts. They're fast, athletic, explosive. Colson pops off the tape. Like, you watch him, he's flying all over the field, like sideline to sideline, incredible makeup speed. When he's used as a blitzer, he's flying into the quarterback. I've seen plays where he just absolutely blows up blockers. Like, I'm talking about offensive linemen, like lining up again, like to try to stop him on a blitz, and he'll drive them off their feet backwards. So he can generate a lot of power, and he has tremendous momentum when he's moving forward. He's moving side, and he's got a lot of speed going to sideline. He's in on a lot of tackles, 101 tackles, right? And
Yep.
that it's interesting because he doesn't play like a run stopping Mike linebacker. He doesn't play like a guy who's just chasing after ball carriers. For him to get 101 tackles with the way he plays is really impressive. It tells me he's just chasing guys down all over the field. And I think that's some of that Michigan mentality, right? Where they're playing with their hair on fire.
Yep.
And I think you see that from the Michigan players we've gone over. Like, they just play a certain way. That's Jim Harbaugh, man. He coaches these guys up, and so you see the way he plays with a sense of urgency. Unlike Trotter, who's controlled and composed, this guy plays just like absolutely reckless, and he's fast. But is he a polished run defender? No.
Yeah.
He's got a lot of development left to happen. It's interesting. You listed him at 6'3", 235. Brookler had him at 6'3", 245. And I think that's
Wow.
an up. So I think he has put on about 10 pounds of weight from last year to this year. And I think that was one of the things we're looking for, because the guy is big. He's 6'3". So at 235, he looks skinny. And he's beginning to look a little bit more stout, like a true big linebacker. So, I think this is a guy who I'm going to pay attention to more as the season goes on, especially as we get towards like the Big Ten title game and these big spots, because he played well in it last year. He played well in the playoff games. This is a riser. To me, he's a lot of upside, and if he has a really solid year at Michigan, he puts up another year of like 100 tackles, and he's showing the pop that maybe was missing a little bit in the run game. I think that he's going to rise up, and he's another guy I think is going to blow up the combine. I could see him leapfrogging some of the guys we just went over. So high upside guy. That's how I look at him. Like I said, if there's a criticism, the way he tackles, he has this tendency to just kind of run right by guys and then kind of reach out with an arm and grab them and try to spin and drag them to the ground. And I think that works in college, but I think if you're trying to do that against NFL backs or NFL size players, they're just going to shake you off. So I think there's some technique issues that have to be worked out with him. But as an athlete and as an upside ball of clay, I think this guy is really, really good, and he's going to come out of Michigan a solid player. You're going to get a really good player out of this guy.
Yeah. No, I think he was an interesting player because I was looking at all these different players who all kind of were these freak athletes, as we say. Like there's gonna be a lot of guys who aren't even on this list who are just going to test off the charts come the combine. He's one of them. But you look at that size 6'2", 35, and I didn't even see the Brugler 6'2", 45. So that makes it even more interesting. But you see the potential of him really being a built out linebacker based off of what he already has. And where he plays in Michigan, he's almost entirely in the box, while
Yeah.
a guy like Barrett plays almost half his snaps in the slot. So he's not like that. He plays almost exclusively in the box. He he plays for a great defense, and that's going to put a lot of pros in the league. So that was another reason I really kind of liked him here, despite you know feeling like he had a similar profile to some of these other guys. Being that athlete, like you said, being that sideline to sideline type linebacker. I also feel like he has a lot of success in the backfield. He's always seems like he's always back there causing havoc. That's another thing I really liked about him. But despite him being a guy who plays almost exclusively in the box, I feel like he looked kind of small in there, and I felt like he didn't really have the strength to bang inside with these guys. I felt like he was kind of getting thrown around when he was really, you know, attacking the line of scrimmage and, not kind of just like waiting and running after when he had good closing speed. So he kind of wait until somebody made a move and close in on him and stop him quick. But when he's trying to get in there and like stack and shed, I felt like he was having a lot of trouble. Um,
That's where the
but I
weight might
think
help him.
yeah, I think the weight could help him. I have to take a look at some more of his tape this year and see how what they're talking about has held up. His PFF grades are very, very similar last year, so I'm assuming he's kind of picked up where he left off. But yeah, man, I agree with you. I could definitely see him being a riser. Ideally, I think he is a will linebacker in the league,
Yeah,
but
I
you
agree.
know, if he puts on some weight, maybe he's a guy who can do some like maybe. I mean, that's what people said similarly about like Okereke, who we have. He's a guy who had probably similar size and athleticism to Colson. So maybe that could be a potential comp to look at. But yeah, uh, I like him. He's definitely an upside guy who I could see make us a lot more excited about this class.
Yep. That's where I'll leave it. I think this is one of those guys we're going to circle back to as draft season approaches, see how he did, see how he tests, to see where he lands. Right now, he's a day 3 player. Early day 3, but day 3, I think. I don't know how Brugler has him, but I have him somewhere around there, like early 4th round.
Yeah, I mean he didn't make the top 50, so
Yeah,
hard to
yeah,
say, but with that said about him not making the top 50, our next guy did make his top 50 and was the
hmm
only one other than Barrett who made Brugler's top 50. So,
interesting. Yeah,
um,
yeah. I'll introduce him. Number 5 on our list, and talking about upside. Here we go. This is a traits guy. This is a Brugler guy. Smael Mondon Jr. He is 6'3", 225 pounds, tall and lean, from Georgia, 5-star recruit, um, crazy good athlete. Was a track star, one of the best triple jumpers in the state of Georgia when he came out. He had last year's numbers: 76 tackles, 49 solo tackles, 8 tackles for a loss, 1 sack, 1 interception. He had a 64.5 PFF grade overall, so not as good as some of the other guys. 63.2 run grade, 79.8 in tackling, 9.8% missed tackle rate. So the lowest we've gone over so far, with only 9 missed tackles total, no pass breakup. So not a ton of production compared to some of these other guys. But there's a reason Brugler has him number 2 on his list. Why don't you go into some of that, Monty?
yeah, man. I mean, it basically just comes down to him being a one of these freak athletes, and he's one of those guys who played on a Georgia defense that just continues to pump out pro after pro and linebacker pro after linebacker pro. And, he plays with really good feel. Those guys are really well coached up. And he's a guy who can succeed in so many ways. He can succeed in the run game, he can succeed in the pass game, and succeeding in the pass game, it comes in two different levels. I mean, you could talk about his pass rush where, he can get one-on-one with a lineman, and it's just his athleticism allows him to beat these guys. And then you can see him in coverage, and he can just turn and run with these guys. He's really good with just like stop and go and just this short area quickness, that change of direction, and as Brugler called it, is his controlled burst, which I thought was a good way to put it. As you read out, Sal, he's a reliable tackler. Um, he just looks different than some of these guys the way he moves, but
He moves like a wide receiver.
yeah, he does, and he has a ton of burst. I mean, that can you mentioned that he was, one of the state's best triple jumpers. It just speaks to burst and explosiveness, and that pops off tape. But 6'3", 225. I mean, that is wide receiver size. So like, it's tough, man. And then his production isn't quite there yet. He's a true junior, so he has time to try to figure it out this year. But I think that this guy's going to be somebody who's best off going back to school. But if NFL thinks as highly as Brugler does about him, I assume he's going to come out and he's going to get some love. Brugler knows what he's talking about, but he's not one of my guys.
Not me either. A big project, this guy.
Yeah.
Just both from the standpoint of developing his game and just having to put on the size and the mass. Like it's fun and it's fast at that size in college. You can win playing linebacker at that size in college. In the NFL, that'll be really hard because not only you're not just asked to carry guys in coverage, you got to tackle some of these tight ends and running backs. Like it's not going to be easy at that size. So he's going to have to put on weight. I think he could definitely use another year. We'll see how he does this year, but like you said, if Brugler's saying he's number 2 on his big board for all linebackers, he's basically saying he's probably a second round pick. For a linebacker, that's about as good as it gets, unless you think you're going to end up coming out and being like a freak first round guy. And there's not a lot of those guys nowadays. So I think he will probably come out in all likelihood if that continues in terms of his projection. But man, I probably wouldn't want him on my team. Not right now. As great an athlete as he is, there's a lot left to be done there.
But I mean, who knows? I mean, if he's a second round pick, there's NIL money, so he might be able to make more money in college than he is in the NFL. Is going back. There's that potential. And then, Georgia, if you're going to talk about, it's not common for these linebackers to go first round. Well, Georgia's the one that's going to get you there if you're going to get there. So,
right.
They've done it. They've done it time after time. So we'll see, man. I think he would definitely really benefit from going back to school. But if he's going to be picked in the second round to late first, I definitely couldn't fault him for coming out. I just wouldn't want my team to make that move as much as I think that there's certain teams that could develop him if they got him into their weight program, things along those lines. But not much else to say about him, honestly. He
one to watch.
You had to talk about him. He's worth mentioning.
Yeah, you want to. So that's our top 5. So just to recap in order, we had Barrett Carter from Clemson as number 1. We had Jeremiah Trotter Jr. from Clemson, number 2. Although we both kind of feel like he's our number 1. Number 3, we had Tommy Eichenberg from Ohio State. Number 4, Junior Colson from Michigan. Number 5, Smael Mondon Jr. from Georgia. So that's our 5. We do have a couple of my guys worth mentioning today. So do you want to go and do yours first, and I'll do mine after that?
Sure. One thing I also want to mention too, Mondon was 29 on Brugler's big board compared to Barrett Carter's 21. So he ranked them very similarly.
Yeah,
I mean, to be fair,
that's a
5-pound difference.
Second round grade.
But
right, that's a second round grade, and that's hard to say no to as a linebacker if you're getting that from Brugler.
But yeah, I'll go into my guy. We're not going to put any tape on the screen or anything because it's kind of honorable mentions here. But my guy here is Deontae Lawson out of Alabama. He is 6'2", 230 pounds. He's a five-star. He was a five-star recruit coming out, and he's a redshirt sophomore. So last year was his first year playing as a redshirt freshman, and in that year he had 51 tackles, 24 solo tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss. He had a 73.2 PFF grade, 73 run defense grade, 67.4 tackling grade, 57.4 pass rush, and 71.9 coverage. So, I read off of those numbers and you look at the tape and he wasn't anything special. He was a solid player. There's a reason that a lot of people weren't talking about him. He's not on this list despite, his pedigree as a recruit and that stuff. But, he is somebody who always seems to be in the right place at the right time. He could get off of blockers and read where the play was going. Just he didn't always, make the play or didn't really make an impactful play. He really didn't pop on tape. But the reason I chose to do him is because at this point we are week 6 of college football going to week 7. Is that where we're at right now?
Mhm.
Something like that. And Deontay Lawson is having a really good year for Alabama so far. And I think that's really noteworthy given the school he plays at, given the conference he plays at, and given who he was as a recruit. So I'm going to read you some of those stats. So yeah, it's 26 tackles so far, 9 of those solo, 3.5 tackles for loss. So he already has more tackles for loss than last season. He has 2 sacks. He had none last year. He's up to 81.5 on a PFF grade, 83.6 on run defense, 90.5 on tackling, 83 on pass rush, and 66.7 in coverage. And he's definitely looks like he's making an impact so far when I'm seeing him. It's definitely limited. And I check out a couple of his games, and they don't really have you know cut ups for just him. So I was just kind of just watching the full Alabama defense, and he definitely was one of the guys who was popping there, and he was making plays. He seemed to really add pass rushing to his bag, but I think this is a guy to keep your eye on and really could end up getting into this top 5 linebackers. And again, being somebody who you can get excited about. And I think that's the thing to look out for is although we're not super excited about all these guys in this class, a lot of these guys do tend to come out of nowhere. Like the fact that Sal and I are talking about all these guys that we're excited from the previous year of football is not that common. You don't see this many guys that you are saying like he was good last year. I would have liked him based off of last year's tape. It's typically a projection.
Right.
It's more
Right.
projection than not normally, and he's one of those guys who I think could be a riser this year.
I agree. I appreciate the breakdown on your guy there, and I think we're going to be doing more guys like that as they rise through the season. Um, I have one more to add, my guy, and we'll close it out with him. So my guy, courtesy of my friend Nunu, another shout out for Nunu, big fan of Oklahoma football. My guy is Danny Stutsman, 6'4", 238 pounds. He ran a 4.62 40 coming out of high school. 4-star recruit, third-year player. He's a true junior this year. Highly productive tackler. 125 tackles last year, 10.5 for loss, 3 sacks, 2 interceptions. The things that stand out when you watch him is he's really a rangy defender in both the run game and the pass game. He's all over the field, and he moves really well for a guy his size. Now he's skinny. He's 6'4", and so 238 is different. When you're Jeremiah Trotter and you're 6 feet tall and 230 something pounds, you look like a big brick. When you're
Yeah.
6'4", 238, you look like Gumby. And he looks so he's a skinny dude out there. He doesn't look like a linebacker. He kind of looks like an edge rusher. or a skinny edge rusher or a wide receiver, and he moves quickly, but he is rangy and he has room to develop and room to grow. And I like the projection on him. And he's still very productive despite, maybe needing to put on some mass. He doesn't look explosive when you watch him on film, but he makes up for it because he's actually a pretty good diagnoser of plays, and he's good at positioning himself for plays like some of these guys we've talked about, like the Eichenbergs and the Trotters. He gets himself into good position, and it translates into the production he has. He's in on everything. When you watch him, he seems to be on every tackle. Like another one of these like a gang tackle guys. Wherever the play is, he's there, which is an instinct I value in these middle linebackers. Um, he's a smart guy, keeps his eye on the backfield at all times, no matter what he's doing, whether he's rushing the passer or staying in his run fits or playing zone. Plays with a high IQ. He diagnoses plays quickly. He has he doesn't, while he doesn't look explosive when you watch him, he has like this sort of like strange navigation system where he kind of very calmly glides and weaves his way to the ball carrier. He just gets there, has a lot of tackles that way, finds a way to just get there. Um, he's a good zone defender, like we talked about, something we value in these middle linebackers. He reads quarterbacks' eyes well, kind of like a safety. He had a couple of picks, and if you watch the picks he had, he's just dropping in his zone and he's basically baiting the quarterback and he's making a quick break on the ball. Not a great pass rusher, but he's pretty effective when you blitz him on the inside. So I think in the right scheme, he can be used in that way. But he's basically just a great tackler. He's a solid tackler. He finds his way to the ball. Nothing right now that stands out as like superstar. But again, this is a guy like I said, Eichenberg is kind of like a poor man's Trotter. I think Stutsman is in the same category. He's right in that category of like a guy who plays really smart football from the linebacker position, really good tackler, nothing that jumps off the tape as being like explosive, elite, like Barrett Carter type stuff, but the kind of guy that makes your team a lot better. What I like about Stutzman is he's projectable. He's only a third-year player, and like I said, he's only 230, what is he, 235, 238 at 6'4". You have to imagine this is a kid who's going to hit the weight room, whether he declares this year or next. And he may not declare this year. I mean, I think there's a possibility he stays for a fourth year. Um, but if he gets up to 250 pounds, 255, which is probably where he needs to play in the NFL at his height, I mean, you're talking about a guy who now is going to be the size of a thumper, who has these rangy abilities. And if 6'4", 255, you know what that is? That's an edge rusher. And while he doesn't have that kind of burst, that becomes a versatile piece. So just from projection, he's productive, he's smart, and he's projectable. And I like those things about him. So he's my guy, Danny Stutsman from Oklahoma. So he's going to get a good test this week, and we'll get into that. But I think that's our list, man. Do you have any other thoughts on these kids we just went over?
No, I think that was a good call out. I mean, highly productive for a true sophomore. So that's impressive. But yeah,
And he's on pace for more. I just checked his stats through 5 games. He has 49 tackles, 9 tackles for a loss, 2 sacks, and an interception already, and a
wow.
touchdown already. Like he's highly productive. And like you got at some point you got to look at that. Luke Kuechly has the record for most sacks in the NFL, right? I think in college football. And just guys who are really productive at the college level, there is something to that at linebacker. It does translate.
100%. Yeah, I
Um,
agree.
and you can go all day about like the traits and all that, but at some point, like a good football player is a good football player, and it translates. And I think Stutzman fits that mold. So he's the kind of guy like I, I think he's gonna go most likely day 3, but I can see him rising into day 2 mainly because of the projectability if he does come out. Um,
Mhm.
all right, I think that's an episode. Unless you have any other thoughts, there are some games to watch this week. This is a good week of games. So just kind of transitioning from Stutzman. Um, the big game this weekend for big college football fans is the annual Red River game,
Yep.
a Big 12 showdown, not including West Virginia. Sorry, man. But but Oklahoma at Texas. Oklahoma is the 12th ranked team of the country. Texas number 3 right now. They are a powerhouse. Games in Austin, I believe. So that game is at 12 o'clock. A lot of prospects on Saturday. We've gone over guys like Xavier Worthy. I mean, Texas is loaded with prospects. Quinn Ewers, their quarterback. Um, they had a linebacker that, um, somebody from Twitter, shout out to you, by the way, pointed out one of their linebackers, and I took a look at him, and I really wanted to add him to our list. And you can watch him, but he didn't quite make the cut with these other guys that we discussed. But they do have, they're good prospects on both sides of the ball. But the
Donnie
Texas,
Mitchell.
Adonai Mitchell, right? And I'm for, and on the Oklahoma side of the ball, I think Stutsman is worth watching.
Yep.
Um, and there are other players on that team. Obviously, Oklahoma always produces good linemen. So this is going to be a good game. It's always a good grudge match. So I think that's a game if you have the time to stay up and watch early. I'm talking about Jalen Ford, by the way. The name was escaping me. The middle linebacker from Texas played alongside Demarion Overshawn last year, and now he's coming into his own. So worth watching. The other games that might be interesting: Missouri, LSU,
Yep. I was
also
going to say
12.
that one
But
as well.
yeah, I'm probably not watching that. I'm going to watch Texas, Oklahoma if I'm able to watch anything.
Yeah, that's
Um,
fair.
it's at the same time, unfortunately. And honestly, later in the evening, Notre Dame at Louisville. It doesn't sound incredible, but I have to be honest. I'm not the biggest Notre Dame fan. I like to make fun of my friends who are because they're like tormented human beings.
Shout
But
out
Notre
one
Dame,
T.
yeah, like 1T and Mike actually. But Notre Dame football has been entertaining, highly entertaining this year. So I give them credit. So I'm probably going to tune into that one on Saturday night. It's at
Yeah,
7:30.
that'll be a good one. One thing I want to mention for the LSU Missouri game, I agree. I'll probably be watching Texas Oklahoma, but if you're looking for good wide receiver play, LSU Missouri will definitely be a good game to watch there. I mean, LSU, we already talked about it, Malik Neighbors, and he's looking like the best wide receiver in the country at this point. Really, he's
Yeah,
playing so well. He's everything we want him to do. And then there's another guy who plays for Missouri. His name is Luther Burden, and
yeah.
he actually is not draft eligible. He's a true sophomore. And he was the number one wide receiver recruit coming out of high school. And he's from Missouri and decided to stay home and go to them. He's the biggest recruit they had since I'm blanking. Do you remember that? It was he ended up going like he played for the Eagles. He was a huge bust, but he was like a ridiculous high school recruit. Um
What position was he?
he was a wide receiver. Um
I'm forgetting. Um, no, I
Dorial
don't know.
Green Beckham. Dorial Green Beckham.
Oh, that's right. Oh my gosh.
He's the biggest
Hmm.
recruit they've had since Dorial Green Beckham,
Yeah.
he was a number one recruit in his class. But except for in Luther Burden's case, he has not been disappointed at all in college. He's been arguably the best wide receiver in college football. He's definitely up there, probably top five right now, and he is a true sophomore playing with probably not the best supporting cast. He's absolutely lighting it up. So, um, fun game there for two top teams with some really good wide receiver play.
Yeah, that's definitely worth watching. All right, man. So I think that's an episode. Thank you guys again. I'll say it again. Like us, subscribe on YouTube, subscribe on iTunes, on Spotify, subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe. Leave us 5 stars. Play the algorithm game. Give us feedback. You can find me at Queens_guy on Twitter. You can find Monty at Monte Cristo at MONTECRI5TO. Reach out to us. We're always hanging around. Send us messages. We appreciate you guys. We truly do. Even if we don't get to the players that you guys mentioned, we appreciate you guys sending us names because we're not done yet. This is just the beginning, and we're going to add them to our list. Um, find us on the timeline. We love doing Twitter Spaces with our buddy Ivan, and just talking football. But reach out to us, tell us what you think, and I guess we'll see you after the Giants game it's a Sunday 1 o'clock game, right? So
Yep.
I guess we'll have a post game reaction. I guess we have to, but we'll
Yeah.
try to. We'll have some sort of reaction probably Sunday evening. Otherwise, you guys have a good rest of your weekend. We will see you on Sunday.
See you guys next time.